And welcome to the What the What podcast. I am your host, Eric Creech, and joining me today now, he's doing what Nintendo don't. Kyle Whitley.
Didn't there used to be like a voice like
Sega? Yeah, that was also that too. That was I think for the Dreamcast. Okay. But like for the Genesis, you put in Sonic and you go Sega. Mm-hmm. So instead of hello, I was gonna say hello, but it sounds like I'm saying the word hell. And so you don't want to do that on a family podcast. Sorry, guys. Welcome to the What the What podcast. We're recording our second one on this Thursday night, and we are very very excited for this episode.
For sure,
this is one that we definitely were putting on the calendar for this year. We're talking about video game consoles today.
We're excited. It's the whole part from childhood to now.
Yes, I mean
you could enjoy this in the 90s or 80s
or they had
something
consoles then, didn't they? I don't know.
Probably.
But very excited about this. I don't even have my final list finalized. I've got a list of 10 consoles to choose from, and I don't know what my order is going to be. So what I might do is, I pick one, and then if you pick one of mine, that's okay because there's another I can talk about,
and we'll have a conversation at that point.
So yeah, absolutely. So, but we're going to jump right into it.
I'm ready.
Because
no need to jibber jabber.
No need to small talk, jibber jabber, whatever. Mm-hmm. We are excited to dive into the world of our favorite video game consoles with today's episode. Good minute and 32 seconds into the podcast recording. But before we do that, if you haven't, please subscribe to this podcast on any of the major podcasting platforms: Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, iHeartRadio, Podcast Addict if your name is Kevin Strickland. That's his favorite way. We're on YouTube. Listen to us there as well. Make sure to search for What the What Media. All one word.
All one word.
And please rate and review us 5 stars. Also, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at WTW_media and on Facebook and Instagram at What the What Media. Again, all one word. One more thing. If you like this episode or any of the other 35 episodes of the What the What podcast, we would please ask that you share this episode with at least one friend. We actually had someone do that this week.
We did. Kevin Strickland. You're the man.
Yep, and we'll mention who you shared it with during our social media shout-out.
Okay, we'll do that.
Well, do you know who it is?
Yeah, I do. Michael and Stephen Ray Latcher.
Awesome.
Brothers. Michael Latcher and Stephen Ray Latcher.
The Latcher brothers, yeah.
He called them in to come comment on what we were talking about.
And I believe have they come through?
They did.
They came through.
So. Well, at least they did on the previous one. Maybe they've had time now to come in and comment on the other one.
I told Kevin, hey, we're recording this around 7. It's 7:30 now, so we gave him an extra 30 minutes. So good times. So Kyle.
Yes.
This is the What the What podcast. It's in the game.
I love all these. These are phrases that I understand this time.
We're doing our top 5.
Okay.
I talked you into a top 5 because last night at church you were like, we got to do a top 3. It's like, yeah, I've only owned 3. I'm like, but dude, there's like a million to choose from. I don't care if you own them or not. You want to play them.
That's true.
So we're doing top 5. I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay.
And I hope you don't. There's one that I really don't want you to steal, and I hope.
Well, the thing is too, like, it's video games, so each person, even if it's the same console, I may like it for one reason, you for another, and it's for us to enjoy together. Video games are made so we can play together.
Exactly.
Players. So
we're doing an episode over the summer on our favorite multiplayer video game experiences. Yeah. Sleepover video games, basically, is what we're calling it.
So jump in as player number 2.
Player number 2, yeah, absolutely. Press the start button, and so jump
here
in.
We go.
Your top selection here.
As I typically do, mine goes into a story or at least a reason.
Okay.
I don't have a long story behind it, but just you'll gradually get from older to newer from me.
Okay, sounds great.
So I'm going to start off with the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System.
Very solid.
My sister, as I've mentioned before, is 5 years older than me, so technically this was hers. I didn't get this; she had this, and all the video games were pretty much hers as well.
Mm-hmm.
It was whenever we got a little bit older that she allowed me to start playing video games with her, or at least having turns. She obviously got more turns because she was older and it was hers. But I owned a couple of those games, and I talked to you earlier today. I said, "Are we going to go into like a deep dive about
the history of it?" And I'm like, "No,
we're not."
Tell me your favorite memories, some of your favorite games.
So what we're going to do is I tried to go about 2 games per, and I'm not going to go deep into those either. We're just kind of give you an idea. Out of all the games that we had, I had one that was officially given to me, which was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game.
And that's the ridiculously hard.
Yes, especially for my age and just that time period anyway.
Going to the underwater dam and like trying to undo all the bombs and not get electrocuted
or drown.
And I mean, just
it was those.
It's hard now. I went back and tried to play that on I downloaded it for the virtual console on the Wii, and 10 years ago. And even like being in my 20s at that time, still ridiculously hard. I can't get past the third. Like I get past that level, and then I have no idea what to do. When you're driving around in the turtle van.
Turtle van. Well, it even takes a while before you get to the turtle van.
Yeah.
Like I remember you're like this tall walking on top of this thing, and you see a sewer or a manhole, you go down.
Yep. And
then you're bigger. It was cool that you would get to choose your character, especially for back then. It wasn't anything to compare it to. It was the first time ever. And being a huge Ninja Turtle fan, it was awesome to be able to have that. Like I said, my parents gave me that game for, I don't know if it was Christmas or a birthday or something, but it was given to me. So I still had to ask my sister if I could play, the game using her system.
Right.
But we did do that.
Who was your go-to character?
I've always been a Michelangelo person. So in the game, he's not necessarily the best.
So for the game, you have to go like Leo or Donnie because they have
long reach.
They have the long reach, and if you can't get too close to these enemies, because they will take the damage out of you. I mean,
and they barely do anything. They just kind of run into you, and it's like, oh no. But something I do remember about this though is at the time I didn't know anything about comic books growing up, like at that age especially. But I didn't understand that the Ninja Turtles all had the same color masks. But on the cartridge, and even on the box, but on the cartridge, it had the picture of the turtles, and they all had red masks.
All had red masks.
Because it was based off of the artwork somewhat from the comic books, and that's how it was in the comics at the time. They all had red masks. They didn't change that into the TV show, so you could distinguish, or kids could distinguish which character was which by changing the colors. But for me, I remember not having a clue why that was, and just thinking maybe it was just,
like a box
art what they did,
mishap or whatever. Yeah.
But that was the first game. Obviously, we had Super Mario. We played that, a ton. And, the Duck Hunt and some other stuff you played. But a game that stands out to me was a game we didn't even own. This video game system was the first time that we ever went to, like, the store. Blockbuster came along later, but in Kinley, where we're from, or at least I'm from, there was, like, a small gas station. Well, it used to be a gas station, but it had... you could rent video games in there.
Yes.
You could rent
A1 Video
in there. Yes.
A1 Video.
And then there was the one now that's now a nail salon over by our favorite Chinese place in Kinley.
Yes.
They had one, a video game rental spot as well there. But this first place I ever remember going and renting a video game from, and it was Tiny Toon Adventures. I remember renting this, and it was the first time I ever had a game, and just the idea of playing something that's not yours, but you can, you have to give it back. But at the same time, you get to play new games. And so we did that. And I just remember playing the game. Honestly, I went back and watched some playthroughs today just to kind of refresh my mind. And it's honestly set up a whole lot like Super Mario. And I don't know if it's the fact that it's set up that way or just the video games at the time were just, side screen, or just slide swiping whatever screen plays. Anyway, so they all kind of look a little similar, I guess, in that. But there's definitely some backdrops and lands that I saw that look very similar to Super Mario. But it was really cool. I remember one thing about that was you would have a character that you chose, but then you would also choose like an alternate character.
Right.
So if you lost, your life went all the way down, then you would be the other character. Or like you could swap out here and there if you got certain areas. But then after each level, you would get to pick another second one if you wanted to change your character. It'd give you like 2 or 3 options to choose from. But I just remember that. It's my first introduction really into video games. We technically had an Atari, but we didn't really have anything for it. And I assume it was like my parents or something, that maybe they had. It may have been my sisters, but it wasn't something I have like memories of playing. I remember we had the horrible E.T. game that I would like forget about and put in and be like, oh, I'm going to play this.
They literally like put thousands of these in a landfill because they were it was unplayable.
Yes.
It was so awful.
As a child, I would forget that and put it in every couple months. But honestly, Nintendo's where it was at. NES is, that's where all this happened for me. And
revolutionized gaming for sure.
Yeah.
So. With me, the NES was something I remember playing it as early as 3 years old in 1989. The original Super Mario Brothers game. I remember you don't have like the best idea of like speed and depth perception at that
Sure.
age, but like getting to level 1-3 was an accomplishment.
Sure, yeah.
Being able to get there, and I couldn't get past because you had some harder jumps there, and I just couldn't picture it. But love the NES. I remember some of my favorite games was the Mike Tyson Punch Out,
Okay.
which I did not realize as a child, but it's basically a rhythm pattern game.
Okay.
I mean, like it's like Dance Dance Revolution, just with your fingers, because I mean the opponents do the same things. You have to figure out the pattern, and then you just input the things, and so it's not really much of a boxing game. Still to this day, I cannot beat Mike Tyson or Mr. Dream if you're playing it after he lost to Buster Douglas in '91.
You couldn't figure out the rhythm.
You couldn't figure out the rhythm because he was just so hard. I mean, there's a point where you get there and it's like obviously the boxers get harder. I also remember like Super Mario Brothers 3 was a favorite.
That's we had that one.
We bought that at Lowe's.
Okay.
This is when Lowe's used to sell video games. I think it was like right after it came out in 1990, so I was 4 or about to turn 5 in 91. So we bought it around that time, right before Lowe's stopped selling video games.
I don't even remember Lowe's selling
Well,
video
exactly. I barely remember, but I remember seeing it at Lowe's. I'm like, okay, I want this. And they stopped selling video games shortly after like the Super Nintendo came out or whatever. But those two games, and then like games like Bases Loaded. Like I was a big baseball fan, so I don't remember doing any. But I remember getting really excited if I would hit a home run. And,
Sure, yeah, that was the big thing.
Good thing, things like that. I had the Turtles game too, and it was just hard. Me and my dad actually borrowed a copy of Contra.
Okay.
From one of his friends. We never returned it, and I remember telling Dad like, "We ever gonna return this to Mr. Linwood?" He's like, "Probably not. He's got a bunch of our stuff too."
Hopefully, Mr. Linwood doesn't hear this.
I bet you we still have that copy of Contra somewhere in our house. And then my dad would play Top Gun.
Okay.
It. And Rickie's actually talked about Top Gun, and and I could never land the plane on the ship. So
I was horrible at it. I remember that. I remember playing that and being horrible at that, and I'd crash it every time.
So my memories of the NES there. My first option. My favorite game is not on this system. We'll talk about that system later, I'm sure. But a large collection of some of my favorite gaming moments came from this system. This is the Nintendo 64. You see it if you're watching it on YouTube here. And this was the video game system that defined my multiplayer middle school, high school experience. Because for the first time, you could play with 4 controllers. So you're not just taking turns playing one-on-one or whatever.
Yeah.
You can have 4 people, split screen, 4 different boxes on your TV. If you had a friend who had a huge big screen TV or that big box, whatever, that was the ultimate gaming experience. I actually never really owned a 64 as a kid. My brother got one for Christmas. He was not a big video game player, so I ended up with it like 3 weeks afterwards. And he got tired of me coming into his room to play, so I just ended up with it in my room.
Nice.
But some of my favorite video game moments, we talked about last summer on our favorite video games episode, but I'll mention just briefly a few of them now. Star Fox 64 was fantastic. It had different paths you could take, easy, like a medium path and a hard path, and then like realizing that there was multiple paths out of a level and then beating it on the actual true ending mode, going through all the hard paths was a huge accomplishment for me as a gamer. GoldenEye 007, the ultimate multiplayer gaming experience. But even the single player mode, a lot of fun. An Australian video game streamer named Just Cook just got done releasing a YouTube series of him live streaming that video game on 00 Agent mode. And it's got some language, so some caution if you look him up, but it was a really enjoyable watch. The wrestling games, the THQ AKI wrestling games, started with WCW NWO World Tour, worked its way to Revenge, which was my first experience with like an awesome wrestling game like that. And then WWF got the license from THQ, and they put out WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy, which is the ultimate, still to this day, in my opinion, the ultimate wrestling game experience. I don't care what kind of games they're putting out now for the PS4, for the Xbox, One, whatever it is now. The No Mercy N64 game is still the best wrestling game experience to this day. It's just a super fun system. I can't say enough good things about it. Both single player, multiplayer. Just one of my favorite game experiences. Is to this day, I will pull this out and we'll play it at gatherings. So
well, I'll add to it because it was on my list. And not to, it doesn't take away from it because once again we talked about how it's your experience versus mine. I never owned one either. That's why eventually, like last night when we spoke, I wasn't going to put it on my list because I technically never owned one. But I do agree. Like I feel like the Nintendo 64 is the ultimate sleepover video game, everybody hang out system to play on. Now, sure, I'm sure if you grew up in a younger generation now, that yes, you're accustomed to Xbox or Xbox One even or PlayStation.
Where you can play like over like online or whatever.
Yes, you can play with everybody.
But before we had online, you had to go to somebody's house.
You did, but the's something about that though for me, and I know it's just me being older.
It's an intimate experience though.
But the fact you're sitting there with 3 of your friends, and most of the time you at least have 1 or 2 more.
Yeah, where
cheering you on, waiting for their turn. For whoever died, then they got your spot.
Yeah,
it's honestly it's in a way. The arcade used to work where you walk up to a machine somebody's playing, put your quarter down and be like, okay, well, I got next.
Yep.
It's the same way here. I remember multiple times, like you have 4 at the start, but then you have the rest and be like, whoever, I got whoever loses or whatever and jumps in with that. GoldenEye, obviously one of the all-time best multiplayer games, especially for, and I refer to it back as like sleepovers or whatever, but just times that your friends were all together and you hung out with each other. But for me, I was never good at that game. Like I just wasn't. I'd more so would hang out in the bathroom stall or like in the ceiling because I once again thought it was cool to have little hidden places.
Kyle actually broke the sacred rule of picking odd job the last time we played this. You're not allowed to pick.
And you know what? Yeah, that's true. It is a rule, and I knew that rule, and I never played with Eric, but I already knew the rule because that was a rule that went everywhere.
Because odd job gives you too unfair an advantage. He's too short. You have to actually aim for him, whereas everyone else is a normal height.
And I still got shot because that's how bad I am. So I left that off my list. I just threw it in there to mention it, but. There was 2 games that I remember more so in 64 that I want to add in. I won't go too in depth because, like you said, this later this summer we are going to have a more in depth video game sleepover list. But I remember, and I think you were a part of this at some point. But we used to go to our friend Trent's house.
Yeah, Trent's. Yeah,
and we would all sit around and at this time, 360 was out at least, and PlayStation
2
was out. But we would play some of those. But then we would stop and pull this out, and we would play NHL Hits.
Yes, we would.
And if you don't know, it's the hockey version of
NFL Blitz, which is another great.
Yes. And once again, as I mentioned that before, like I'm not great at football games, and so I'm decent at hockey games because I like hockey. But Hits was just awesome. We'd play together, and it wasn't a matter of who's better at scoring.
No, we just wanted to hit each mess out of each other.
We would literally because it was awesome. Where Hits even had the little like you pick 4 players, you're in a hockey rink, and it's how many times can you knock the other person down. And so we would have all 4 of us sitting there watching that or playing that as different characters. I want to say there's like sharks or other like animated characters.
Yeah.
And, we would say sweeps only. So you could only hook the person and try to knock them in. You couldn't hit them. And then we would do a round of deeks only.
Yes, deeks only.
Deek.
I still have no idea what a deek is, but I remember it's like, hit the deek.
Nothing else was happening. Somebody in the background was yelling, hit the deek.
Hit the deek.
And it was just where you would just like spin in a circle and literally you couldn't knock anybody down by doing that. But we would do it for about 30 seconds. Like, okay, forget this and start hitting each other. But something as simple as that.
We'd also play like Mario Party.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that your other game?
I put Mario Kart down.
Yeah, Mario Kart. I didn't even mention Mario Kart. Oh my goodness, yeah. Mario Kart, especially Mario Kart 64, which is the 64 version of that game. The best Mario Kart game ever.
Okay. I would agree. At least I
know, so I have like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch. We'll talk about that later. And it's fantastic. All these characters. But the ultimate experience: 8 characters, all these tracks. It is challenging, and it's not it's not too friendly to the people who are like in last. Like you actually have to have some skill. Like in the new games, you can be in last place and then get like 2 blue shells and then just work your way up to the front. I just feel like it's too friendly to those who are not very good at the game. Whereas this game, if you're not good, you're not going to win. I mean, like just the competitive person in me is like, hey, I want to play a game where if I'm good, then I get rewarded for being good.
Well, I did to it too. Is I made a note about how. I'll talk to some other about some racing games, but I was decent at racing games. So the same way I was decent at Mario Kart. Like GoldenEye, no, I'm horrible, but put me playing that, and I could contend with at least the top 3 with that. And so it was always fun to sit down because it was the same way. You'd have 4 people, even at Trent's house who play this too, and it'd be like, okay, I got next. I got whoever gets knocked out. Or sometimes if you had 8, you'd rotate and like do all sorts of things.
You would also do like battle mode.
Yeah.
And that way, like if you're the first one out, you would rotate out or whatever, and just stuff like that. So.
And so it was just cool ways for you to make up your own little rules and stuff like that, but just to switch out so everybody could play. But it was the first time that you would ever, we obviously were older at this point, but for that system, it was the first time you could ever just sit down in a room and it's not everybody watching one person or watching 2 people. It's everybody can kind of get in on this and enjoy it and be.
It's not a super long wait. So.
No.
What's your next option? Your next selection there, number 2.
After NES, I don't remember what age I was, but the Sega Genesis came out.
Came out in 91, I believe.
Okay. I don't know if I got it the first year or not, but I do remember getting it, and it was my system. It was the first system of my own that I ever owned. And I remember, of course, you had Sonic the Hedgehog that came with it, which honestly coming out in a movie soon. That
comes out tomorrow.
Tomorrow, okay, well, great. Great.
Originally, I wanted to do like Sonic the Hedgehog, just that one game. And you're like, well, how about we just do video game consoles in general?
Sure.
So,
it's a little much to talk about Sonic collecting gold rings for a long time. Man, I know there's backstory. There's a cartoon series that I used to watch. You've got it. But all that, anyway, I used to do all that. And Sonic was great. Don't get me wrong. I love playing Sonic. But there's a couple of games that stood out more to me. The first one being Earthworm Jim.
Yes.
It was a game that I remember playing and honestly feeling like I could get in trouble for playing this game. Especially at that age. Like I was young.
Right.
And so, and I don't think there was anything too crazy. It was just kind of like how the dark themes of like that game was. You were literally an earthworm named Jim who's using this giant, or using a robotic suit that's mostly shooting guns, you're shooting birds, and you have cats and all sorts. It's crazy. It's like a weird game, and It was amazing. But I remember it just being a little on the creepy side for like my age at least, and being surprised that, my mom bought this for me. And so it's one of those things you hear coming up the stairs and you would kind of turn the volume down just in case something was going to happen while you were playing. So that was my first one. Number 2 also goes a little along the lines of your dad and his friend Linwood.
Yes.
I borrowed X-Men 2 Clone Wars. Well, I didn't borrow, I rented it from A1 Video.
Right.
And I remember, first off, to tell the story to go along with Linwood, I thought that we had returned it. Like, I didn't have it anymore. I didn't know where it was.
Right.
And so, but they called my mom asking and being like, hey, you haven't returned this game. You have these fees or whatever. Like, no, I'm pretty sure we returned that. I don't have it. Like, it's not here. And then years later, I found it.
They were probably out of business then.
They were.
Maybe because of you, because you didn't pay your fees.
I didn't take my video game.
You took down a business, Kyle.
With one X-Men video game. I did find it like in a drawer later.
It's like, oh.
I say years. It could have been days or months. I don't know.
Right.
But at that point, I do know they were shut down, so I couldn't take it back at that point. But this game for me was different than the rest. First off, I was watching X-Men animated series at the time, had a few comic books, and so it's one of those things for me. I really got into the X-Men, and so just being able to play them and be them beyond just your action figures.
Yes.
And playing with toys, you're actually getting to be them and interact as them on a
You get to
game.
slash people with Wolverine, you get to shoot people with Cyclops' optic blast.
And something that was cool about this game was you press start and literally the game starts.
Yes.
It starts as like a little fuzzy screen, it opens up and you're a character. You don't choose which character you are. The game randomly picks a character for who you are. It's snowing, you're fighting ninjas, you're fighting like lasers and cannons and all this other stuff. You're going through this whole course. I remember because there's a reset button on a Sega too, or a Sega as well. And I remember sitting on my chair because I had a little TV, as a small TV on top of this desk that I had in my room, and like a little drummer stool that I would sit on and play my video games. Well, the system was down at my feet, and I remember I'd start, and if it wasn't the character I'd want, I'd just keep tapping it with my toe, like to reset the game until whoever I wanted to come up. Typically, it was Wolverine. But I would play through there, and then once you beat the first level, then it finally gives you like the screen, like the opening screen where it's like, X-Men 2 Clone Wars, and like all these things. Then you can pick your characters and everything else. It has the big opening scene there.
Yeah.
Turns out you were in the danger room the whole time, and that's what that first scene was.
It was basically teaching you how to play the game.
Yes. And it was just one of those ways that if you died, the game started over. Yeah. But it wasn't moving forward yet. So it was one of those things that was just cool. Like, as I remember, it took me a while at first being a young kid playing it to beat it, that level. And then I was like, oh, now the game's actually starting. And now you're being a different character. I don't know. It was just cool for me. And then to see how things, I don't know, just different. It was different because, going from the Ninja Turtle game on the NES that I just wasn't great at. So all of a sudden now you have these characters that are more defined,
Right.
have special powers that they can do different things with. And, I don't know. It was cool. I feel like, I don't know if there was more characters later on, but I know there was like Beast, Gambit, Wolverine, Cyclops.
Probably Storm.
I felt there's a couple more, but not many. Like, it's not a huge list that you were choosing from. But I don't know. It was just something for me. It was the game I remember playing most because I've always loved superheroes.
Right.
So the fact it was the first time I ever remember playing, besides obviously Ninja Turtles, but being these characters you see on TV and getting to interact and act out your own.
Right.
You are a member of the X-Men at that point.
I've got a couple of add-ons with the Sega Genesis.
Sure.
Two quick stories. One, the Sega Genesis was the first game console that I bought with my own money. I believe it was the summer of 95. Might have been 94, but I think it was 95. I spent a whole summer cutting grass.
Because that's what you did as a child.
At $1 a yard. Cut 300 yards that summer. Had $300.
That's an awesome story.
Went out and bought a Sega Genesis that came with Sonic and Knuckles.
Oh, that was good. I had
And
that.
Sonic and Knuckles was great because you could play it standalone, but it flips over and you can connect Sonic 3 and you have a whole nother game with it where you can play Sonic 3 as Knuckles or whatever, and the two stories are connected, and that was a really cool technology.
Sure.
So that's the first story. Really enjoyed that. The second one is last summer when we did our third annual Joe Davis Classic, which will, this year be renamed to the Joe Davis Invitational. We used the Sega Genesis as our main console. We actually went to your childhood home, raided your house,
because our other system wasn't working.
The Super Nintendo, the controller wasn't working, so we went.
I was like, well, I have a Sega. I haven't played it, and probably it had been at least 15 years that I hadn't turned that thing on. And so we went and found it and rounded up the games that we could find.
We found the WWF Royal Rumble,
which was my first wrestling game I ever played.
We found the Power Rangers fighting game.
Yep.
We had Mortal Kombat. The main things that stick out, one, there was this great match between me and Jacob Nash and the Power Ranger where we were in the elimination bracket.
Yep.
And we were just, best of three, and we got down to the final round of the final match. We'd each won 2 rounds.
So it's whoever wins takes it.
And we both got down to it was very close. And I eked it out, and then I lost, I think, to you in the next round. But Rickie and Joe were in the finals.
Yep.
And Rickie had found, in this WWF Royal Rumble, he had found Papa Shango. And he was just dominating. And the way we did this was the game was picked at random every time. We had a little randomizer. And if it came up on the WWF Royal Rumble, Rickie was dominating. He lost because Mortal Kombat came up in the final round and not.
Well, the way the tournament worked too was Rickie literally every time it was his turn to play
it landed on him. So and
it was Royal Rumble, so he got to play. So he didn't even play Mortal Kombat until the very end.
So he lost to Joe Davis. We finally won the tournament that's named after him.
And was it Mortal Kombat or Power Rangers the last one?
Mortal Kombat was the last one. Yeah. And that's the one that got me in the losers bracket because I was playing. It was either you. No, I lost to you in that in the losers bracket after I beat Jacob in the Power Rangers game. So a lot of good memories with the Sega Genesis.
For sure.
My number 2 goes back to my 7th birthday. I received a Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the SNES.
Nice.
This makes my list for several reasons. It has, just a load of games that I really enjoy, including my favorite series ever, the Donkey Kong Country trilogy. Donkey Kong Country 1, good game. A lot of people will still rave about it, but my favorite game of all time is Donkey Kong Country 2. And I really enjoyed DKC3 as well. So I actually still go back and play DKC2 and 3. I used to do it once a year. At this point, it might be once every couple of years, just due to time limits or whatever. Other games that I found enjoyable, NBA Jam,
100%.
which was on multiple systems, but I was I actually bought a copy on eBay so we could play at the Joe Davis Classic last year.
And the remote or controller didn't work.
And it's still at Jacob's house. So we need to make sure we get that for this year's Classic or Invitational. There's just a horde of fighting games. Street Fighter 2, you had Mortal Kombat, but to me the gold standard, Killer Instinct.
It's a good one.
Was not as well known, but I feel like it had better graphics, better characters, and it was just fantastic. Turtles in Time, Turtles 4 was one of my favorite Turtle game too, especially multiplayer because you had all these great characters, but then you go back in time and it was fantastic. I can't say enough good things about the SNES.
And not to steal it from me.
Oh, and sorry, Super Mario World is my favorite Mario game. 96 exits, which is still an accomplishment. That's another one that I go back and I try to beat it. All 96 exits. It takes me a couple of days just to, whatever, but it's just one of my favorite gaming experiences ever. So.
Well, like growing up, I had the Sega, but my cousins had, Amber and Lewis, they had a Super Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, that was the big rivalry. Genesis and the SNES were pitted against each other. That comment we made at the very beginning of the podcast, Sega does what Nintendo don't.
That's true.
I mean, that was Sega's marketing ploy.
That is true.
You had Fat Mario Plumber, and then you had Super Fast Sonic.
Yeah. I remember going to their house. You were talking about fighting games, and I remember that was the first wrestling game I'd ever played beyond what I had on the Sega, and it was WWF. I want to say In Your House.
It was In Your House or Super WrestleMania?
I want to say it was In Your House.
Okay.
Because it was, you had people like Undertaker, Bret Hart, all these people, but say for like Undertaker or other people, they would do these above wrestling moves where it was
like he would throw out the little spirits.
So,
I think that might have been Super WrestleMania.
It may have been. I don't know. I remember playing the level In Your House multiple times. Like the arena in it. So I remember that, but I remember playing that for the first time because at the time I'd gotten to WCW and I knew those characters, but I didn't. Same way I didn't. We talked about it some. My mom didn't care for WF, and I would secretly watch it. But it's one of those things. That's where I started to know some of these characters more, because he played it at his house when we played it together. And I don't know. There was that, and then there was also, I want to say it was Batman Returns.
Yeah, Batman Returns was on there. Batman Forever was on there as well. Like the
movie it was Batman Returns, and it was cool because there was these little clip scenes that like you do. It honestly followed the way the movie went.
Right.
That you're fighting the clowns, and it would have like a pop-up screen of like a digitized, like this is, you're fighting the clown, or you're pulling the brick out and hitting the clown in the head.
And the other one that I would fail to mention, Ken Griffey Jr.'s Home Run Derby.
100%.
Just fantastic. That was a good party game as well. That was the party game before the 64 came out. We would still pull that one out even with the 64 to see who could hit the most home runs. So, what's your number 3?
Number 3 is my next video game system that I got. I was in middle school and I got a PlayStation.
Okay, I have a story about this too.
I feel like my cousin Lewis once again had a PlayStation before I did, and that's what inspired me to ask for it for Christmas. And so I got that for Christmas, and beyond that, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Yes.
That's a game that changed video games for me forever. I already liked skateboarding, but then Tony Hawk's Pro Skater sent me to a level beyond that, where I played that hours and hours. It's the first time I remember playing video games late into the night, all night, doing whatever. Same way you would go to a friend's house and play together. It was the first time I remember taking memory cards with each other to so you could go to your friend's house, instead of taking the whole console, you take the memory card and plug it in. It's
the first time video games companies realized, hey, we can make more money off people by not having a lot of memory on the actual system.
That's true. And you can save things and take it everywhere. But I remember it's the first time we were playing games where we had cheat codes.
Yep.
Where we would go to school and you would leave a guy in manual mode where he's like perfect balance doing this manual trick. Just let him leave him there. Turn your TV off, let the PlayStation keep rolling. So by the time you come home from school, turn TV back on, he's still doing the trick, and then you finally land it and get all these points because he's been doing it for 8 hours. That
power bill must have been through the roof, man.
Who knows? I didn't pay for it, but there was that, and I remember too that was the first one that had a soundtrack with it that meant something to me.
We listened to it a few, like some of the songs. Setting Up for a Kitchen a few weeks ago, or a few months ago.
Superman by Goldfinger is one of my. I still love that song. It just gets you hyped up some just listening to it. But that whole soundtrack, I still pull it up while I'm at work, like keying orders and stuff, and just listen to it. It's the first time I ever remember having a video game system that I liked the soundtrack. Just I had a soundtrack in general, but to play along with that and listen to it all at the same time. The other one would have been I didn't have like a big other one. That was my main one, but some other ones, honorable mentions: Twisted Metal 2, your car game that you're shooting each other at, that you were technically the drivers or whatever. And then Crash Bandicoot, which is a huge one.
My goodness, Crash Bandicoot.
So
another just fun story. I bought my own PlayStation in the summer of 1998. Again, cut grass all summer. At this point, I was making either $2 or $3 a yard.
Nice.
Doubling or tripling my profit there. Yeah, definitely. And we had just started school that week. And on the third day of school, we had a hurricane come through. It was like a Category 1, Hurricane Bonnie. And it wasn't that bad, but they canceled school. And my mom, she got off work and she's like, well, I don't want to stay in the house to go to Walmart because it's not that bad. And I was like, well, let me go grab my money. I want to buy something. And I had $300-400, I'd saved up for so during Hurricane Bonnie, while the power was going out at Walmart because it kept flickering, bought a PlayStation.
That is awesome.
Favorite games, you mentioned Crash Bandicoot 2, and Crash Bandicoot Warped. Another one of my favorite trilogies. I loved Crash Bandicoot. I love platformers like that. Spyro was a fun game.
Sure.
Which, I didn't play much of it, but I had the demo. So, like, I would play, like, the Spyro 1 level on the demo that became come with the PlayStation. I somehow just remember ending up with a bunch of like games that I don't remember ever getting. Maybe I borrowed or whatever. But yeah,
right into your dad's shoes. Yeah, say, you know what? Hey, Linwood, let me
borrow some of these games, Linwood. But yeah, enjoyed the PlayStation for sure. My number 3, we're gonna go to handheld.
Okay.
The Game Boy, which is it makes the list for a couple of reasons. Again, we've talked several times about my summers, my after schools, going to cut grass with Dad. Well, between yards, as a kid, it's hard to do homework in a moving truck.
That's true.
So you got to be entertained somehow. And as much as I love listening to WQDR on the radio, 94.7, sometimes country music just got boring to me. So enter the Game Boy. And I had the original big gray block, took 4 batteries, had a green screen, and that ate up batteries like nobody's business. And I didn't, really remember like all these great games, but I do remember one that we've talked about, Pokemon. Pokemon Blue, basically like was my favorite game.
You had that on like the gigantic?
On the gigantic one, yes.
See, I always had it on like the Game Boy Color. Or
yeah, well, I didn't see, I didn't end up with a color till they came up with Pokemon Yellow, and I got it packaged like a special Game Boy with that. That was my Christmas present that year. Which I should have mentioned that during Christmas presents, but I didn't remember. So,
Mr. I don't want to brag about my gifts.
I don't want to brag about my gifts, yeah. But Pokemon was just, super, super fun. It's in the Game Boy. The other game I just remember playing for hours and hours is Tetris.
Yes, that's what I remember most.
Trying to get like to the highest level, and as it gets harder and harder and harder. But yeah, the Game Boy, definitely one of my top 3 consoles.
Technically, my sister had the Game Boy, and she had Tetris, so when she would get bored, that's whenever I would get to steal it.
The Game Boy was another one where I ended up with games, and I have no idea where they came from. I either borrowed them or, inadvertently stole them, I don't know, or maybe my mom and dad picked them up at like a flea market, and they were just appeared.
Linwood's out there living on the street. Like
I had all these games I was going to sell, and now they're all gone. But
a quick note, not to jump too far back, but PlayStation. I remember you talk about still having some systems. We obviously still have some here, but I lost my PlayStation. One time I went to Brandon Evans' dad's house, Sammy Evans' house, and I was spending the night, and so Brandon didn't have a PlayStation. He said, "Bring your PlayStation, we'll play Tony Hawk." So I brought it. I remember it being in a Carolina Tar Heel gym bag. It's like a cloth gym bag with the old school RAM on the side of it. Loaded everything up in there, took it there. I remember I still have that bag at my parents' house. You open it up, there's no PlayStation in there. I remember for a long time looking like, what happened to my PlayStation?
Right.
And I remember asking him, and because he was talking one day, he's like, yeah, he had these new subwoofers for his car. I was like, oh, cool. Like, where'd you get those? He's like, oh, well, his stepbrother, Tyler, said it was Tyler's PlayStation. You won't play with it no more. So I took it out to the pawn shop and got these subwoofers. That was my PlayStation.
About that, yeah.
And he said, no, it won't yours. It won't yours. Brandon Evans, you went and pawned my PlayStation.
Like just look right at the camera.
Right now. You pawned my PlayStation and got those subwoofers.
And now you're a cop.
Go arrest yourself. Arrest yourself. But thankfully, I think at that time I moved on to my next one, so it didn't hurt me as bad. But it does stink to look back and you have all these games and no console to play them on. My number 4.
Okay.
This will be a number 4/number 5 for me since we already talked about my 64.
Right.
Or not mine, but 64. I combine these two, but Xbox and Xbox 360.
Right.
And the reason I combine them is because for me, it wasn't some giant leap. I had my Xbox in high school, and then when I went to college, I still had an Xbox. It wasn't until I was in college living away from my parents' house that it broke. And I went to GameStop and bought a 360 because it made more sense to buy the newer one versus the older one.
Right. 360
had been out for a while, and the main reason I bought it was so I could play a lot of my older games I already had. So I will start with some older games that really made it for me, and then just kind of finish everything off with the 360. But Tony Hawk was the pro skater games, the whole line. For me, every year at Christmas, that made my list. They continued on to the Xbox. I continued playing with them. But it was this series that I really got into that honestly made a difference in my life today, even so much. But the Need for Speed games, all the racing games, every year at Christmas, that automatically made my Christmas list, because every year around Christmas or a little before, they'd come out with a new Need for Speed game. But I remember Need for Speed Underground 2. I've spent so many hours, and I know I've talked about it before, but just playing that game, because this is the first time I remember that you really had this whole setup where you could customize your car. It was legitimate, actual name brand cars. They were actual models. It wasn't some fake generic thing that looked like something else. But you could spend hours changing the colors and changing body kits and changing, the wheels on it and how low it was and all these things. I probably spent more time modifying these things than I did actually driving them. But I remember that instilled it into me because I was in high school and started driving, and it got me into wanting to work on my own car. Even to this day, I still work on cars and have film cars and stuff. And so it extended into that. But similar ways where I remember with the Xbox going to my friend Glenn's house, and he had it too. And even with Brandon and the rest of us, even though that wasn't a game that we all could play together at one sitting, one person would play a race and we would beat the game as a whole, because you play story mode. And we would just play it, and we would have somebody else watching it and being like, oh, watch out for this turn, watch out for that, and help each other. And then, if you're wrecked or you didn't finish, the next person do it, and we would remind each other of things that were coming up. So I remember that being the same way. We would just go in a rotation of, okay, well, you get the controller, now you get the controller. Right. But it wasn't something we got bored watching each other. We had fun with it. But for me, that was that. And then when I finally moved to the 360, even moving where I live now, I was married with the 360. Married my wife and had the 360, but the Batman Arkham games came out.
Yeah, they were awesome.
And that changed it for me. The same way I talked about earlier, going from Ninja Turtles to that X-Men game. Now I'm talking from here, the Batman Arkham games are just on a whole nother level. I remember I only had one of them. I don't remember which one. It's my 360 broke years ago, and I decided not to buy another one because I got back in that way of staying up all hours of the night playing just one more level, and then 4 hours later finally going to sleep.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing the fact that I love Batman. He's one of my favorite superheroes, but just that his sidekicks, his partners, and then just the rogue gallery and how I don't know, stuff you relate to because you understand it's not just a random shooting game. It's an actual game that you put yourself into. You get to be Batman. I am Batman at that point. But just how that continued on, and so that's why I just combined the two together. Like I said, the console itself, sure, it was better, and the graphics were better, and the system was better. But for me, it was just slow evolution between the one to the other. But that's cool. What made it for me.
I've got a quick Xbox 360 story. I had an Xbox 360 my last year in college, and here's how I ended up with it.
Okay.
Me and Kyle Daltrey and Kyle McClam were hanging out at my apartment in Wilson, and I didn't have a 360 at the time. I think I had a PlayStation 2, which we'll talk about in a second, and I had a Wii. We'll talk about that in a second too. And Kyle's like, I really want to play Gears of War 2. It comes out today. I was like, well, we don't have a 360. He's like, well, I don't feel like going home and getting mine. He's like, I've got some money. Let me just buy y'all an Xbox 360 and you can pay me back. We literally went to GameStop. He bought an Xbox 360. He bought Gears of War 2, and he bought controllers.
Yeah.
And I paid him $20 a month for the next 2 years to pay that thing off. And
you could have gotten a lot worse deal.
I mean, that was literally I was a broke college student. I mean, I was eating bread sandwiches for lunch because I didn't have any money. I was trying to pay, work and go to college and pay off this apartment. And he's like, "Here, I'll just buy you a game system because when I'm hanging out here, I'll have something to do." And it's like, okay, if you want to do that, are you sure? He's like, yeah, absolutely.
How about you buy a couple other games so when you're not here, have something else to play?
So, he ended up buying a couple other games, and eventually I would buy a few games. But that's how I ended up with a 360. Me and Kyle Daltrey went through Rainbow Six Vegas, and 1 and 2. And we ended up with the Call of Duties and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely just interesting how I ended up with that system. I ended up selling my system to Gavin Daniels the year before I went to Africa to help pay for that trip. So yeah. Inadvertently, Kyle McClam helped pay for my trip to Africa. So,
nice. Way to go, Kyle.
Way to go, Kyle. I'm going to combine my 4 and 5 too in the interest of saving time.
Okay.
But they're both. I'm going to go with the PlayStation 2 as my 4, and my Nintendo Wii is number 5. Number 2 or number 4, PlayStation 2. It makes the list for 2 reasons.
Okay.
Number 1, it came as a DVD player.
Yes.
And that was huge. At the time, DVD players were still new and they were super expensive. And if you're going to spend like top money to get a DVD player, you might as well get a gaming system to go with
I
it.
did the exact same thing when I got 360.
So I think my brother ended up with a PlayStation 2 again and again. It's like for Christmas, and he didn't play it, so I ended up with his system again. And it doubled up because it was also a DVD player, which I already had one of those. So I let him use my DVD player, and I would use his PlayStation 2. So the other reason is it just had so many wonderful sports games. And like in each genre, you had Madden 04, which had Ray Lewis on the cover, which was the first Madden experience I had. Literally, my college freshman experience was me meeting a friend and us bonding over playing Madden and creating Barton College football, which is getting a football team in the fall.
You predicted all of this.
Literally. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be the starting tight end or not. But
let's hope they don't get Linwood.
Let's hope not, no.
Linwood?
I don't know. Anyway, so like Madden, you had MLB MVP Baseball 2005, the best baseball game of all time. They had college baseball, which was really cool.
See, I had college baseball on 360, and I made my own team, the AstroTurf Gorillas, and we won the whole thing.
And then you had like your NBA Lives, NBA 2Ks, and all that and stuff. So it's some great sport games. They also had like Tiger Woods PGA Tour 05, which is you could play as Justin Timberlake in that game, which was fantastic. So the PlayStation 2, and then a couple of years after I started college. Over the summer, I think it was like 4th of July weekend, I was like, you know what? I got some extra money. I want to buy a Nintendo Wii. It looks pretty fun. It had just come out the year before, so I went out and bought a Wii. And the Wii has probably been like the gaming system I've used the most over the past decade, because it's a great party system. Just Dance, Wii Sports. The motion controls was huge, revolutionary. I use it in my classes sometimes, like end of the year. I would pull this out and have all the Wii remotes, and the kids will take turns like dancing or whatever on the big screen. And the really cool thing about this is you could download old video games, like you can buy them and on the virtual console. So this is how I relive all these other classics I've talked about for years and years.
I was wondering about it, to be honest. I don't know if you just pulled out an old system.
No, I don't have all those old systems. I have all of them on this thing, which is really cool. And just a lot of memories involved in that. I remember in college, my fifth year, I was taking exercise physiology, and I was not doing great in it. And the professor was like, anyone does an independent study, will get extra points, extra credit, whatever. And I was like, well, if I pay the money to buy this Wii Fit and the balance board or whatever that had just come out, and I do a study on the effects of testing on me and a few friends, would that count? They're like, absolutely. So bought it, splurged the money because I needed the grade because I was not going to go to school for a 6th year. And that project got my grade above a C so I could graduate on time.
Nice.
I ended up with a B- in the class actually. But without
but
without it, I would not have gotten that grade, and I would not have been able to pass the class. I would have had to take it again and probably not graduate on time. So, which led to me getting a job at Lindo Kinley, which led to me moving to Micro. I mean, all good things. All good things. So the Wii inadvertently got me through college.
That's true. That's
so yeah. I do have a couple of honorable mentions that I want to mention. The Dreamcast only lasted a couple of years. It came out on $9.99. Was revolutionary for the time. I had a Dreamcast, never really played it much, but there was some really good games. Marvel vs. Capcom is the one that sticks out the most to me, but Sonic Adventure was also another really good game. The PS4 is something I owned briefly. Great graphics, just never had time for it.
You almost bought another one.
I almost bought another one
because of that Spider-Man game.
Because of the Spider-Man game that I just,
great.
But I also decided to be a responsible adult and save my money, which I'm glad. And then the Nintendo Switch is one that I own now. And there's some great games out there. Again, I'm just no time for games, but Super Mario Maker, they just put out a new Pokemon game, which I bought and I'm probably end up selling because I beat it. And you can buy, you can play like classic games on their online system, which is free. So, good stuff. Do you have any honorable mentions?
I don't really. I mentioned mostly all the things that we ever played growing up. Like I said, I did have a Game Boy Color, but it was just for Pokemon. Like I played Pokemon. Honestly, I don't remember much. Same way, but my neighbor Molly had a Dreamcast, and I feel like we played Street Fighter maybe one time, and that's all I ever remember playing. So, but yeah, the other systems, I always just love video games. Anyway, it's fun to play, but I've not been a person. Like, I would love to have another console now, but I know right now I don't have the time to do it.
Time, and so. Jump into our social media shoutouts. I don't have any witty segue here.
Awesome. So. You guys were amazing today. I posted this today, and you guys went nuts on this, so it's awesome to hear how much you guys love video games and the systems that you grew up with as well. So I'm just going to jump straight through the list. James, I think I know a lot of your names on Instagram and stuff, but I'm just going to do your names on here just so anything else, let's go find you or follow you. It's right there. So James RN29, Nintendo 64 is his favorite one. Joel_Fitz_ says, laugh out loud, not fair. NES, Genesis, 360. I always had a place in my heart for an arcade though. So we didn't even mention that, but I told him as well, there's always something special about going into an arcade now, just hearing everything, the sights and the colors that you see. And I'm glad that like they're still around and you're seeing almost like a comeback now. You're seeing it in a way where now you pay for like an hourly fee and you just play everything, which is really cool though. Like I've enjoyed that. So if you haven't done that, check that out. DCAU_bat is Nintendo GameCube. That's one we didn't even mention. Aiden Colio is my PS3 because I have so many good memories of when I was little playing Assassin's Creed 3. That stood out something to me too, and I mentioned it at the beginning, but it's cool to see this because each of us may have a completely different game and memories with these things. I think of PlayStation, I automatically think of Tony Hawk, but it's the same with everybody. You grew up in different times, different memories, maybe who you played with. It's just neat to see how these type of things can bring you together, just the memories you have in general. Johnny No Name 82 said the Dreamcast, and I mentioned to him about like I only played it like one time with Molly. He said Sega GT was the one, also Tokyo Extreme Racer 1 and 2. Said the Dreamcast was also the first console to have NBA 2K on it.
That's right.
80s parody on Survivor said Super Mario on the NES and Mario Kart on 64 are two favorite combos.
Nice.
And William Wright, 180, you jumped in, William. We finally get to throw your name out there on the podcast. Says best to worst: PS4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox, Wii, Wii U, Sega Genesis, Nintendo, Atari.
Okay.
And William also he's what, in high school now?
No, he's still in middle school, yeah.
So, I mean, just to see still, and he's got older siblings, but then parents too that play video games and everything else. So it's cool to see how through time it gets passed down even within your own family. So let's switch over to Facebook and see what all you guys said here. Tim Hutchinson, our great researcher, producer, all sorts of things that he's been doing for us lately. Appreciate him.
Video editing.
Video editing is his new thing he's working on. He says, I grew up with an SNES, so Super Nintendo and Genesis, but being the youngest of four, we had an Atari 2600, which I don't remember actually playing, but I've seen pictures of me watching my brother play, and an NES. Being a huge fan of fighting games and RPGs, my favorite classic systems would probably be the PS1 and PS2. Currently, I have an Xbox One and a Nintendo Switch, but the Switch gets the most use by far. Edit, where he came back and edited himself, says, how could I forget the Dreamcast? I know it only lasted a very short time, but it had some really great games, way ahead of its time.
Yes.
Then Edit 2, where he came back again and said, and the PS Vita, also very underrated systems, but it saw the release of one of my favorite series of all time, Danganronpa. I'm sorry, I probably butchered that.
Probably.
Sorry. Chris Rode, our good friend
Chris Rode.
He said yes, yes, and yes. Top
Yes.
10 in no particular
Happy
order.
anniversary, by the way,
Yeah.
Chris and Haley.
Recording
I've actually never met Haley, but
Haley's awesome.
Haley seems like really awesome. Can't wait to meet her
I
one
want
day.
you to meet his son Jasper.
Yeah,
He has
Jasper.
more energy than either of us combined.
That's cool.
I've hung out with him. I've been on walks with him. He's awesome.
That's really awesome.
Anyway, back to Chris Rode. His list, top 10, no particular order: Nintendo Switch, Nintendo 64, PS1, Game Boy, NES, Wii, Sega Game Gear, which is not another one.
Yeah, and I had a Game Gear. It 8 batteries, but you had a color screen.
Yeah.
Really
I didn't have
amazing.
one. I remember seeing the commercials and always wanting one,
Yes.
but I never owned one.
Status right there. Game Gear was a status.
For sure.
Okay.
PS2 and then PS4. It said, I do have a lot of handhelds on here because we used to travel a lot when I was a kid, and it helped me pass along the boring rides on I-95.
I hear you, buddy.
Going through the old Facebook, you and him went back and forth on a lot of it.
Yeah.
Honestly, talking about Star Fox and some of the other games too.
Mostly my wish is for, like, if they were to re-release the DKC trilogy, like HD update for the Switch.
That'd be awesome.
The way they kind of, did Aladdin and the Lion King, or Crash Bandicoot. And also my wish for them to have a Star Fox game on the Switch.
That would be awesome.
So anyway.
James Nichols also commented on this one. He said, again, Nintendo 64.
We hear you, buddy. We hear you.
Joy Woods Wright, William's mom, also commented to her husband, says, Kevin, you need to weigh in on this one, which I don't think he did. But thanks. Anyway,
Yeah, we appreciate it. Absolutely.
This is where Kevin Strickland commented and said, Michael Latcher, Stephen Ray Latcher, what you guys think?
Yep.
So bringing them in. Let's see. Kevin said the pressure's on because you told him we recorded at 7. He said it's hard to pick just one top console. I feel like I've got a story and loads of memories from playing a lot of these. I thought if I had to pick one though, it would probably be the original PlayStation. I had played on consoles before this, but I feel like this was the one console that got me hooked on playing video games. And I said the same thing earlier too. Like I enjoyed my Sega, and I would play a lot. But PlayStation was the first one where I was hooked. You would stay up late nights. Just could not put it down. And Steven last year commented back in. He said the original PlayStation was a great startup screen, was welcoming.
Yes,
it really was.
It really was.
And also Matt on Facebook said Nintendo 64, PS3. Does a phone count?
Yeah, I mean, does it count as a console? I would say it does. In my opinion.
In today's time, yeah, I would say so. Switch have one, but everyone else plays it. PS2, PS1, Sega, NES, Game Boy, and the Wii was all right, but never bought one.
Right.
So I still actively play the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 3. I have a game for the Switch, but it's really the kids. So some of my head's kids' games, but he still does get to play it some. We thank you guys for chiming
Absolutely.
in. You're awesome, and it's cool because, like I said, each one of you have different experiences with different consoles and memories, and I don't know. It's cool to see how things like that can bring us together on a similar topic.
Well, and for me at this point in my life, like I said, don't have a lot of time to actually play video games, and my skill level is not where it needs to be. But I've found a new love of video games by watching people play online and on Twitch. So I want to give a quick shout out to some of my people I like to watch. Grand Pooh Bear. I actually have a Grand Pooh Bear hat. I should have wore it for this episode. I know it's at home. I'll take a picture of it and send it to you. Ryu Car, DGR Dave, The Dragon Feeny, and Just Cook. They are fantastic streamers. They mostly do Mario stuff. Cool. And but yeah, check them out on social media and stuff like that. So
awesome.
All right, friends. A big thank you, Rickie, Liles, Tim Hutchinson. Wonderful, irreplaceable producer, researcher, video editor, etc., etc., etc. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as we did, and that you're as pumped for the rest of this journey into 90s nostalgia. We didn't actually talk about this, and we were supposed to. Next week, are we doing our live Disney tournament, or Disney March Madness tournament?
It's possible.
I think we are.
I'm not sure where the calendar's at right now.
I think that's what we're doing. If not, we'll do Iron Man 2. I know it's coming out at some point in March too, because the next episode will come out in March. But I think we're doing the Disney tournament, which will technically air live in February, but it'll come out in March on the podcast. So anyway.
Tune in online. We're going to be talking more about a lot of that as we continue to get all that planned out.
Yep. So until next time, now we're playing with power. Stay as cool as the other side of the power glove. Stay as cool as the other side of the pillow. Hey, we'll see you next week.
What the what?